Beijing's controversial zero-COVID policy had a tremendous impact on the economy. But now, China is facing another risk to its economy as it gradually loosens COVID restrictions. The country is expected to face a further infection surge, which might cause more economic disruptions. Reuters cited Mark Williams, chief Asia economist at Capital Economics. The transition out of zero-COVID will eventually allow consumer spending patterns to return to normal. But a higher risk of infection will keep in-person spending depressed for months after reopening. In fact, the fear of infection is widespread. Even though the lockdown order has been lifted, there are still no people. In Wuhan, where the pandemic first broke out, stores and restaurants in the city are barely operating. Zhu Chongping, who has run a small restaurant in famous Wansong Yuan for 30 years, felt sad when he looked at the empty seats in the restaurant. Zhu said, "In our street, store owners are still struggling. They all believe that life will return to the way it was after the relaxation. Everyone has this fantasy." Wang, who runs a clothing store, said, "Hanjiang Street is also a wholesale market, and the flow of people used to be quite high. Many tourists from other cities used to come here. But now, all of that is basically gone." According to Capital Economics, economic activity has so far been weak despite the easing of zero-COVID restrictions. Many households look to minimize interactions amid the current wave of infections spreading across the country. Data from China's National Bureau of Statistics supports this report. The country's retail sales dropped by 5.9% in November from a year earlier. The figure is below analysts' expectations of a 3.7% decline, compared with a 0.5% year-on-year drop in October, the most significant monthly reduction in 6 months since Shanghai's lockdown in May. The statistics agency said that in November, the pandemic spreading to most of the country's provinces led to a drop in tourist arrivals. This impacted sales of non-essential items. This is not the only problem. It's reported that around 1.9 million retail companies are on the verge of bankruptcy. The giant retailer Walmart closed a store in Shenzhen, its first store when it entered the Chinese market. Besides, Walmart is downsizing its business in China. Another giant retailer is making the same move as Walmart. It is the major French retailer Carrefour. Carrefour closed more than 50 stores in the third quarter and announced its withdrawal from Henan province. As of the end of September, there were only 151 Carrefour supermarkets in China, 54 fewer than in 2021. Another multinational retail giant, IKEA, closed its stores in Guiyang in April, then announced the closure of its store in Shanghai in July. As a result, the youth unemployment rate is super high. Fu Linghui, the Statistics Bureau representative, said that employment pressures have increased. In November, the urban unemployment rate of the labor force aged 16 to 24 was 17.1%. Meanwhile, the nationally surveyed urban unemployment rate was 5.7%, an increase of 0.2 percentage points from the previous month. Real estate, the main engine of China's economic growth, continues to be in crisis. Real estate recorded a 26.6% drop in total residential and commercial building sales. According to Reuters calculations, real estate investment fell 9.8% from January to November. Accordingly, real estate investment fell 19.9% from a year ago. This is the fastest drop in over 2 decades, amid the ongoing property market crisis. Meanwhile, exports, another main engine of China's economic growth, contracted at many lower-than-expected levels. In November, China's exports shrank by 8.7% from a year ago, while imports also fell by 10.6% as domestic demand weakened. Alicia Garcia Herrero, chief economist of Asia-Pacific at Natixis, said, "December data might be even worse. That's not because everything is getting worse in China, because the end of the tunnel is coming." She added, "I am expecting a big collapse in industrial production in December. This will be the immediate consequence of the opening up." On December 13th, the head of the International Monetary Fund warned to lower China's growth forecast for this year and 2023. In October, the IMF cut the country's economic growth projection to 3.2% for 2022, with a 4.4% GDP growth forecast for 2023.